Hello, I'm Esther Githu. It's Wednesday, July 19th. This is Africa 54. All right, the fighting that erupted between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces in Khartoum is unleashing a surge of ethnically charged violence in Darfur. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
Fighting between Sudan's government army and the rapid support forces is spreading into the Darfur region of the country. Sudanese journalist Shakua Nyaketo, who recently fled the country with his pregnant wife to Kenya, says the situation in Darfur could get worse and there is no end in sight.
The other indicator that the war will not be end very soon because each part started to mobilize. Al-Burhan started to mobilize people from different parts in the country in the name of the army, that they should voluntarily come and join the army. They are doing so right now, as well as the Himeti from his side is mobilizing people from Darfur. Most of, many tribes from Darfur have declared that they are going to support, and they have already started recruiting young men to fight with Himeti.
The RSF, originally formed to fight Darfur rebels, has a strong presence in the region, giving them an advantage in the fighting. The government army is trying to consolidate its power and to prevent the RSF from becoming too powerful. Nyaketo cautions that the conflict in Sudan could end up being a genocide.
This is going to escalate and it may lead the war into civil war. And if that has happened, then we're expecting Rwanda story to happen again in Sudan, but we don't hope that.
Previous fighting in Darfur killed more than 300,000 people and displaced 2.5 million, according to the United Nations. Atrocities committed at the time led to the International Criminal Court to charge former dictator Omar al-Bashir with criminal offenses, including genocide. The court's chief prosecutor has launched an investigation into suspected war crimes in the current fighting, including sexual violence and civilians being targeted for their ethnicity. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Meanwhile, Sudanese farmers say that problems caused by the country's violent power struggle between military factions may have delayed the planting of crops until it is too late, potentially deepening a food crisis. David Doyle has more.
War between military factions in Sudan is putting the production of staple crops this year at risk, farmers in several states have said. And that's threatening to drive the country deeper into hunger and poverty. The conflict between the regular army and the paramilitary rapid support forces has already created a dire situation in terms of food security. In May, the United Nations estimated that the number of people going hungry in Sudan would be 19.1 million by August. That's an increase of almost 3 million from before the conflict, which started in April. But this crisis could deepen. More than a dozen people, including farmers, experts and aid workers, are reporting delays in planting crops such as sorghum and millet.
The preparation of land has been delayed.
Adam Yao, the Food and Agriculture Organization's representative in Sudan, says big commercial farmers, responsible for 50 to 60% of millet and sorghum production, are affected.
Having a lot of problem to have access to fuel, fertilizers, and in a way that they can plant on time. So in those big commercial lands, the farming has been delayed.
Most agricultural areas in Sudan are relatively calm. Many farms are not directly affected by the fighting. But farmers say the delays have been caused in part by a lack of credit from the banks. The conflict has largely centered on Khartoum, where banks were looted and forced to limit their operations. Supply chains centered on the capital have also been widely disrupted. Those who have been able to acquire financing report steep price hikes for key inputs such as fertilizers, seeds and fuel. Eyewitnesses have also reported some warehouses storing fertilizers, seeds and pesticides being plundered. The FAO said last week it had started emergency distribution of sorghum, millet, groundnut and sesame seeds. It hoped, it said, to navigate complex security and logistical challenges to deliver enough to cover the needs of 13 to 19 million people. But some farmers say they fear it might now be too late to plant. A wide-scale failure to do so could cripple livelihoods. According to the FAO, nearly 65% of the population is engaged in the agricultural sector. Sudan also risks being deprived of the foreign currency needed to import basic commodities. According to central bank figures, cash crops such as sesame and peanuts accounted for $1.6 billion in export revenues in 2022.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. The presidency's office in the Central African Republic says dozens of troops from Russia's Wagner private military company are on the ground in the country to help secure a constitutional referendum set for July 30th. President Faustin Archange Touadera is on the campaign trail for the constitutional referendum, which, if passed, could remove a two-term presidential limit and enable him to run again. The Central African Republic has about 5.5 million people, and it's rich in gold, diamonds and timber, but it has struggled to find stability since independence gaining in 1960. The country of around 5.5 million people and rich in gold, diamonds and timber is still struggling since 1960. Russia's first sent security contractors to the Central African Republic in 2018 and stepped up its support with more than 1,500 troops, including instructors and soldiers fighting alongside the country's army. Some of the troops are part of President Touadera's security detail and are regularly seen with him. Meanwhile, here in Washington, a lawsuit was filed against the Wagner Group by the Libya-American Alliance, alleging that Wagner fighters stationed in Libya murdered 3 members of a local family in 2019 after detaining them without explanation. The plaintiff, a Libyan national, Mohammed Abduljalaya Ali Anbiz, a Libyan national, survived the assassination in which 3 members of his family were killed. For more on the Wagner Group, I'm joined live via Skype from Washington by Monji Dawadi, a political analyst and executive director of the Libya-American Alliance. Monji, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me, Esther.
There's a long read here, but let me take you first to the Central African Republic, where President Faustin Touadera has invited the Wagner Group there to oversee the fact that he wants to run again to make sure that he gets the constitutional referendum in his favor. What do you make of that?
Yeah, this is not surprising. I mean, the Wagner Group has been known to thrive into these kind of conditions of instability, chaos, and they are basically mercenaries. They're guns for hire, and they will do whatever is asked of them to achieve the goals of their employers at any cost. The Wagner Group has been brought into Libya, for example, by the retired General Khalifa Haftar, because he planned and he wanted to take over the country by force. And so he brought these folks knowing full well that they will operate outside the law. They do not abide by any international norms. And that's where lies the danger. I mean, this is a group that, as I said, they thrive in chaos. They thrive in lawlessness. And to me, to see the Wagner Group in Central African Republic is not a good sign. It's a sign of some problems to come, and hopefully that the country can overcome its own political crisis and get rid of this foreign entity that is operating basically on material gain. They just get paid for what they do, and they will do it at all costs.
Monji, let's move on to Libya, where the Libyan-American Alliance has now filed a lawsuit here in Washington. What do you expect will be the outcome of this lawsuit against the Wagner Group?
Well, first of all, this lawsuit was, when we launched it, and we've been preparing for it for quite a while, we wanted to focus the international attention and people on some of the injustices that were carried out in Libya and these extrajudicial killings that happened, like our plaintiff that you described at the top of your comments. And so what we would like to see is that the courts and the judge listen to all the evidence that we will present that basically indicts the leader of the Wagner Group, because under the law that we are citing, we cannot file a lawsuit against the whole group, but we can file the lawsuit against the individuals involved. And in this case, Prigozhin and Khalifa Haftar, both of them, we allege that they are personally liable and responsible for the killing of members of the family of Mr. Mohammed.
And okay, all right, Monji, I won't ask more. I'm running out of time, but we'll revisit this issue. Monji, thank you very much for your analysis. Monji,
absolutely, thank you so much.
Monji Dawadi is a political analyst and executive director of Libya American Alliance. Kenyan police opened fire on protesters in clashes that left at least 12 people wounded Wednesday as the opposition organized demonstrations calling for the government of President William Ruto to lower the cost of living. Businesses and schools in Nairobi were closed as police used tear gas and water cannons to disperse protesters. The opposition called for 3 days of countrywide protests aimed at forcing President Ruto to repeal a finance law imposing new taxes. The prices of basic commodities have soared under Ruto's administration. The government says the fuel and housing levies, which are expected to raise an extra $1.4 billion a year, are needed to help deal with growing debt repayment and to fund job creation initiatives. Now, for more on Kenya's protests, there were 2 rounds of protests earlier this month which descended into violence when police fired tear gas and in some cases live rounds at the crowds. During those protests, that at least 15 people were killed and hundreds arrested. For more insight into the Kenyan protests, I'm joined live via Skype from New York by David Anserio Monda, a political science professor at City University of New York. He's also a native of Kenya. Professor Monda, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Professor, let's start first with the economic implications of these ongoing protests and looking at 2 things, President Ruto's finance bill and Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, leading these protests. What are the implications here?
I think the implications for the economy are very dire on 2 levels. Firstly, because Kenya relies very heavily on tourism. So this is a peak tourism period with migration of the wildebeest. A lot of foreigners from abroad on their summer come to Kenya for the safari and also for the beach scenic views.
Oh.
But I think in terms of
Professor, I'm having trouble with audio and the Skype looks static. Can you hear me? All right.
The other element of this is the oscillating global prices of oil, which tie into these protests. They cumulatively lead to a rise in cost of living, not only for Kenyans, but affects Kenya's ability to pay its debt, because the shilling continually weakens as Kenya is not able to continue to grow its economy because of these protests. So a lot of these things are very much interlinked.
Professor, very quickly, the Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki has indicated those involved in the protest, including the leader, Raila Odinga here, and protesters may face legal charges. What would this really mean for, this kind of protest and what they're trying to achieve? All right, looks like we've lost Professor Monda. All right, still to come. Will success at the FIFA Women's World Cup translate into gender parity in the form of a bigger paycheck? We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we are focusing on the worst drought in northern Kenya in 40 years. We'll bring you a VOA Africa original documentary, Hunger Voices, Kenya's Food Crisis, which captures how drought is deepening a hunger crisis and wiping out livestock and crops in Kenya, Ethiopia and Somalia. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, Chadian leader General Mahamat Idriss Deby has pardoned 110 more people sentenced to jail terms following deadly protests against the leadership last October, according to a decree. Demonstrations against the extension of Deby's transitional rule erupted last October in N'Djamena and several other cities. Human Rights Watch says Tunisian security forces have committed serious abuses against black African migrants, and they are calling on the European Union to suspend migration control funding to the country. The watchdog says since March it has interviewed more than 20 migrants, and many report suffering human rights violations at the hands of Tunisian security forces. In a social media network ban, including Facebook, Telegram, TikTok and YouTube, are back online in Ethiopia Wednesday after being blocked for 5 months, according to the Open Observatory of Network Interference that tracks online censorship. Access to social networks is now freely available after being shut down in early February. Women's football in Africa is gaining a foothold, but female players often complain of poor paychecks when compared to their male counterparts. Nigeria's female national team, the Super Falcons, is gearing up to represent Africa this month at the FIFA's Women's World Cup in Australia. But supporters are hoping their success at the Games challenges the status quo. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
Blessing Emmanuel started playing football when she was only 12 years old. But her family initially resisted and tried to force her to quit.
My dad was like, no, I don't think I want my daughter to be in the midst of boys, stuff like that. So I just had to convince them.
Emmanuel's father believed she'd be more successful if she focused on her education instead. But in 2020, Emmanuel joined the Niger Rattles Football Club, a local team which launched 2 years earlier, and she soon began to gain some recognition. Last year, she led Nigeria's under-17 national team to India, where the team won a bronze medal. Niger Rattles coach Sonny Udu says the club started with the objective to help especially underprivileged girls find purpose, and it is achieving that.
It's not every girl child that have the opportunity to come from a very good home. You discover that most of them, they are on the streets doing what they don't feel like doing. Why? Just for them to meet up some responsibility.
Women's football is increasingly popular in Africa, and Nigeria's national team, the Super Falcons, is among the most successful. It is the only African team to participate in FIFA Women's World Cup since 1991 and is currently in Australia to take part in the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup starting July 20. Despite the success, female players say they are often poorly remunerated compared to their male counterparts. They have been demanding equal pay. Last week, Daily Mail reported Nigerian players could boycott their first match against Canada on July 21st in protest over unpaid bonuses.
Being a girl child, the expectation of your parents is just for you to work, get married, and then start to born their own grandchildren. So, but you having the passion for the football, you'll be like, oh, this is where I want to make my money.
The club is a private-owned team, so the owner of the club is doing his best.
Supporters worry the disputes could dampen morale at the tournament, but the Nigerian Football Federation promised to address the issue. Udu says it will take some time to fix the issue.
Good thing, what FIFA is trying to do, they want to see how they can match the male for pari passu. They want to see how what the male gets is what the female will get, but it will take time.
In March, FIFA announced that all players in the group stage will receive $30,000 each, while players in the title-winning team will each get $270,000. But while Nigeria's team races against the odds for victory, youngsters back home hope their success challenges the status quo. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
It's time for our technology report, and joining us now is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther. In Nakuru, Kenya, educators at the Freedom School are seeking to incorporate African-centered perspectives into teachings and learnings by bringing technology into the classroom. For more perspective, I spoke to Oku Kanayo, CEO and director of the Children in Freedom School. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, Paul.
About 2.5 years ago, you came up with these incredible ideas when all the schools all over the world shut down. For you, you saw an opportunity. You came up with a model school. So you're one of the first people to introduce e-learning in primary schools in Kenya. You're one of the first people to introduce computers, laptops, iPads, and tablets into schools for these kids to stay in school. Bring us up to speed.
At the time of the COVID, we came up with a platform for learning, an online platform, which actually assisted the kids in their learning. And when I came up with that idea, it became very unique, very powerful, and it has grown, and we became very recognized, and which has now led us into winning several awards, which also includes the World Best Schools Prize Award, which we were nominated as the top 10 in overcoming adversity. Overcoming adversities in COVID. COVID was a serious adversity, and we come up with solutions to be able to give our learners opportunity to learn while at home. That's a terrible adversity that we overcame. Now, the overcoming adversity that we have now won is overcoming the adversity of the limitation of our culture in our learning. And when we saw that gap, we decided to fill it up, and we gave it the Afrocentric curriculum, which also infused serious IT and artificial intelligence. Also makes it very different from what other schools are doing. So for us, we are basically interested in information technology, artificial intelligence, so that we can bring our children up to speed with the global learning space.
You strike me as somebody who is always on the cutting edge of technology. Now here we are talking about artificial intelligence or AI or ChatGPT. You're telling me that you're already on in that space.
This is not the time where we create gaps in our learning space, especially for our young ones. We want our young ones to be at equal with the rest of the world. And I can tell you, ChatGPT is one of the biggest things that has happened in the world, because it is an intelligence that has collected data and resources from all parts of the world and correlate that information, that big data, and disseminate these data into pieces. Now, one of the joyful things about using the ChatGPT, it is automated. It makes learning so easy. With the ChatGPT and the artificial intelligence, it becomes, with splits of a seconds, you can create solutions. Also, because we work with decision making in the offices, in the schools, children will be able to make quick decisions with artificial intelligence. It makes life really easy. And we have already started teaching our kids Python. We want them to start developing programs, games, things like this, so that they can also be, one of them have already started selling the apps that she produces, and she's doing well. I want the entire school to start doing that. There are local businesses that need websites. I want the children to start developing websites for those local businesses. Why is it important for our children to understand artificial intelligence? Why is it important for them to understand automation? Why is it important for them to understand IT, information technology, as high as possible? Is because, to be honest, Paul, you can't survive without it. If you look at TikTok, for example, everybody's on TikTok, everybody's on Facebook, but behind TikTok, behind Facebook, there's a powerful algorithm that runs through. If my kids are able to have those kind of knowledges, I think we'll move very well. I will have kids who are able to actually solve the problems of Africa and the continent and the world in general.
Thank you so much, man. Yeah.
I'm so happy.
Take care. That's today's Tech Reporter. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Paul. Be sure to join Paul Ndeho every Wednesday right here on Africa 54 for his technology report. And that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From our team here in Washington, D.C., thank you for watching.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.